John Marks, Montgomery County Tea Party, here with Shelley Sekula-Gibbs, Dr. Shelley Sekula-Gibbs. She's running for the Township Board, position 5. And as we talked about, Shelley, if you want to kick this thing off, you can open up with a 5-minute opening, and then we'll go around the table. And you have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. Pat's going to be your timer here. There'll be a siren that goes off, or jingle, whatever she's pulled up here, and then we'll just kind of keep going around until we get to the closing point. And I'll kind of give you some milestones as we go through. So if you want to get us started.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you, Montgomery County Tea Party. I appreciate being given this opportunity to come and address you. And as Mr. Wirtz said, my name is Dr. Shelley Sekula-Gibbs, and I am running for the Woodlands Township Board of Directors, position 5. By way of background, I am a 5th-generation Texan from Floresville, which is in South Texas over the Eagle Ford Shale. And that's important because my father, who was not able to graduate from the 5th grade, because he had to go work on the farm, and then he had to go serve and fight for us in World War II. He went to work for Shell Oil Company when he got out of the Navy, and I like to tease him that was how I got my name, Shelley. So he would laugh, and I'm not sure if that's true, but it's a possibility. So there's a lot going on in Floresville today because of the Eagle Ford. We have a farming community there. It's a lot of pump jacks, maize, cattle, that sort of good stuff, and things that are very important to Texas. Makes our identity as Texas, I think. And so then my mother, just by way of background, she did not finish the high school, but that was because of health issues. But they were both very committed to education and brought all 6 of us children up to value education highly, which is wonderful in this state that we have that opportunity. I was given a scholarship to college. I finished at the top of my class, summa cum laude, went on to medical school, and then finished there in the top part of my medical school in the top quarter, and then went on to a residency at the University of Florida, finished there in family practice, then came back to Texas. Could not wait to get back to Texas. I like Florida very much, but could not wait to get back. Finished a residency at Baylor College of Medicine in dermatology. Went out and hung my shingle and started my own business. Ran that business for 30 years and had clinics in Clear Lake, Baytown, Winnie, Mont Bellevue. Lots of employees, 17 at one point. Then sold my practice after 30 years and put our house up for sale and moved to the Woodlands to be close to family and then ultimately a beautiful grandchild. Hopefully many more if God blesses us. So in between there, some interesting things happened besides raising my family, raising 2 children. In between there, I was given the opportunity to run for the Houston City Council, which was a very interesting for a doctor. That's not something you'd commonly hear about. But I took it. I wanted to do that. I thought I could bring something to the table. So people elected me, and I represented 2 million people, which is an at-large, basically, almost 2 million, not quite. So one of the more important things, or a couple of important things that transpired at that time were that are relevant to the Woodlands, I do believe, are that I was able to work with other council members and put through a revenue cap of 4.5%. Before that, it was, I believe, 8%. So that was a significant improvement for the taxpayers in the city. And we were also able to reduce the tax rate at the same time. So I think what's going on at the state level here that's affecting the Woodlands now is a reflection of what many people were doing around the different communities in Texas to try to protect property taxpayers, which is what we all are here. So I think that that's important. Another good thing that we did in the council is we kept open, and I spearheaded some of this with other good people, founded the Ellington Field Task Force, which kept open the Ellington Field Air Base that was under threat by the BRAC to be closed, that would have really exposed us to more terrorist attacks that had, of course, happened up in New York, and we didn't want that kind of thing being welcomed or invited to Houston, especially because we are the oil and gas capital of the world here. So we kept it open, and not only that, but we were able to expand it into a joint reserve base. So that was exciting for me to be able to get something accomplished that required federal, state, and municipal cooperation to make it happen. We worked with Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison and state authorities as well to do that. So that's the kind of experience that I bring to the Woodlands Township, to the people of the Woodlands, to say yes, we can work together with state, federal authorities to bring down more resources and to produce good results for the people of the Woodlands, for their future and for future generations.
All right, thank you for that overview. And going through the questionnaire, you're pretty obviously for incorporation. If you can state some of the advantages, maybe some disadvantages, and how soon that you think that ought to happen, and why. Now, if it's now, why now? If it's later, why later?
Well, when I was on the council, and coming from Clear Lake, remember, I knew the history of Clear Lake. In 1997, they were forcibly annexed by the city of Houston, and I don't think they ever got over it or recovered from it. In 1996, I saw what happened in Kingwood. They were forcibly annexed, and they had hired spike in taxes and reduction in services, poor streets, poor response time for law enforcement, and then the ultimate insult, we shared all the way 60 miles apart one council representative between Kingwood and Clear Lake. And if that would happen to the city, to the township of the Woodlands, it would mean that the Woodlands would be divided in two. You would have a Woodlands part of Houston, like South Woodlands, and then you'd have a Woodlands part of Conroe, like North Woodlands, and it would be divided. Very, very bad for the people and the identity of the Woodlands. Not to mention that the tax rate would go up, or I will mention that if we were annexed, the tax rate would go up to 0.57 from 0.227. It would go up to 0.57. That's a 2.5 times, 2.5 times higher what they're paying in Houston versus what we pay now in the Woodlands Township. And Conroe we would go up 1.8 times for the people who would be annexed by Conroe. So that would be dreadful, I think, for the people. So yes, I do think that incorporation is vital. Now, that's not the only reason is to prevent annexation. No, it's also to give us more parity and warding off any incursions by other entities that want to build roads into us, or roads that would impact us, bringing more traffic and crime and pollution, like the Woodlands Parkway extension. Definitely would give us more leverage on fighting off those kinds of incursions. And also with flooding, it would be a big improvement if we could be a city, and then we would be able to bring down more funds from the federal government and have a vote at the Houston-Galveston Area Council regarding those issues.
Okay, great, thank you.
So you mentioned the Houston-Galveston Area Council. The county represents the region now. But they seem uninterested in participating in that function, so we as a county, we get less money than Liberty County gets. And we probably lost $80 to $100 million in this last go-around. So how would you, if we have a seat, or in the interim, before we get a seat, if we incorporate, how would you work with the county to encourage participation so that we don't double pay our taxes like we are now to get these roads and improvements?
Well, when I was on the city council, I did have some experience with the Houston-Galveston Area Council it was working on reducing the rate of uninsured patients going to emergency rooms and overtaxing emergency rooms. And there was a committee that came out of that called Save Our ERs. And it was a collaboration, you know, not just with Houston, but with all the areas around, because a lot of the people would come to Houston hospitals for crisis. So I'm familiar to some degree with that entity, Houston Galveston Area Council. And I think it's unfortunate and also very detrimental that the township does not have a vote or a real presence in that council, because a lot of money for roads and other projects goes through the Houston Galveston Area Council. I can't make someone attend the meetings, you know, that's something that has to be pushed, and if they're not gonna do it, they're not gonna do it. But what I would commit to you is that if we were a city, that the township would be very well represented. I'm sure that people would they would howl if we didn't have their representation on something that important. So I think that we just have to keep putting pressure on the elected officials who are not attending.
How much time is left?
32 seconds. 30.
So a quick question, so the budget's getting tighter in Woodlands now, and so you have a choice of cut spending or raise taxes, and so how do we keep taxes flat and improve the efficiency of the?
Well, I think you have to look at the last 8 to 10 years, and then the tax rate has been sequentially reduced, which has been very positive for property taxpayers, both commercial and residential. We've cut about 30% of the tax rate. Right now, sales tax revenue is going down, and expenses are going up, like streetscape maintenance, as well as expenses for trash pickup and recycling, about $3 million difference there. So, and if you say the sales tax diminishment, that's another million, so about $4 million. So yes, it's a big deal, and I think that we do have to do what they're doing, which is one of the ways is reducing some of the new hires that they were looking at hiring, which they have done, and also there was a refinancing of debt. And this is such a low interest rate environment, it's the right thing to do, refinance your debt as much as possible so you're paying less on debt service.
James?
What commissioner's precinct, which commissioner's precinct do you reside?
I am in James Novak's.
Precinct 3?
Novak's precinct, yeah.
So now we know that already the city of Conroe, Shenandoah, all these other cities in the county currently pay their own city taxes and turn around and pay county taxes. So, and I guess obviously the county commissioners court, in your case, commissioners precinct 3 and 2, always had the option should the Woodlands incorporate anytime soon of sharing the cost of certain roads, maintenance and construction, that sort of thing. Presently, it appears that both commissioners are adamantly against incorporating, certainly anytime soon, probably ever. My general question on that is, and I'd like you to provide some specifics, how do you feel our current county commissioners over the Woodlands area, what do you think their vision is for the Woodlands, if any, and how does that correlate with your vision for the future of the Woodlands?
Well, that's hard to predict what a county commissioner is going to do from any one year to another. I have heard what you have just said, that they're opposed to incorporation, and I suppose that's probably true, but I haven't had a one-on-one conversation with them.
Do you feel like they'd be less or unlikely to share, in other words, let the Woodlands get back the tax dollars as a city that they've already paid to will have paid to the county?
Well, I look at it like this. Once we are a city, if it does come to pass, if the voters approve it, and if it's a sensible thing to do, and they're convinced that it's a sensible thing to do and we do it, I think the county would be, because we do provide so much of the county's tax base, we have a big voice there as well, and I think that they will be more likely to get on board with notions that are mutually beneficial once it's a done deal versus fighting tooth and nail against it before it happens.
Well, I guess what I'll say is that the rest of the county, certainly precincts 1 and 4, seem to have some resentment that the Woodlands gets what it gets. And don't want to take into consideration what the Woodlands pays to the county. And I don't see that 2 and 3 actually do much in the same regard. So my question is, how do you think that's going to change?
Well, we have about 20% of the population of the county, and we
Right.
provide 40% of the taxes to the county. So we have clout just by virtue of that much of our contribution. And I think that people who have that much financial resource can influence county government. So whether there is, and once we are an independent, autonomous, self-directed city with a mayor and a council, those elected officials can represent that community better than a community that's struggling to work through those issues. I think we're in a little bit of a weaker position now, and once we are established, our strength will be improved.
I think.
Okay, just trying to, some probably fairly easy questions. I'm not exactly sure how long you've been in the Woodlands?
About 2 years.
Okay. And I was also trying to understand, because it strikes me interesting that a dermatologist would enter into politics, not a natural transition. My mind has one of these discontinuities. So could you explain that a little bit? What you said, you used the word earlier, you had the opportunity to run for Houston City Council. Had politics ever entered your mind before that? That came after you retired from your business and sold it? And...
No, but I would be happy to explain.
Okay.
Gil, thank you. It goes way back to high school. I was president of my class for 3 out of the 4 years in high school. And then when I was in the residency in Florida, I was also elected to be the president of all the family practice residents in Florida. So I had some experience there in just leadership, as basic as it is, just in leadership and learning how to work with people on a larger scale, geographically certainly, in Florida. Then what happened, when I was married to a gentleman who you may or may not know, but his name was Sylvan Rodriguez. And at the time we were married, he became very ill, and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And so for a period of probably couple of years, let's say, he was very sick, and I shrunk my practice at that time. He had many times discussed possibly running for office in his life, when the children were all out of college and things were a little more stable, and I thought that was a great idea. But then when he got sick, he started looking at me going, well, maybe you could run. This is for Congress now, and I'm a private practitioner, right? And I laughed and I said, well, there are a couple of problems. One, nobody knows me, and I really don't know anything about that. But the opportunity was I had shrunk my practice, and I had already become almost like a part-time owner of a practice, really reduced it because he was sick. And so when he passed away, I said, okay, Sylvan, if this is what you wanted me to do, and God's going to bless me with this, then I guess I'll throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. So that's kind of how that door opened up.
Okay, thank you.
One of the big issues with a lot of the candidates is what you mentioned here about clear cutting.
Yeah.
That seems like a private property issue. Are you talking about preventing property owners from cutting their own trees?
Yes and no. When you are in the Woodlands, there are rules in place about what you can do and how much foliage you're supposed to keep between the street and your actual building or your actual landscaping where you start. And what's been happening is that's just been not enforced well. So those are rules that are in place already, even before the person bought the land. They were there from the time that George Mitchell set out his, the first dream that he had about, or vision I'll call it, that there would be a thick boundary of trees between the actual enterprise, whether it's a home or a business, and the street view. And that's been diminished over time. So it's not a new thing, it's just basically enforcing things that are on the books.
So would
already.
incorporation impact this at all?
Well, I'll give you the fine details there, yes, it would. Because right now, if rules are broken like that, the best that the township can do is attach liens to the properties. And as you and I know, you don't have to pay a lien until you sell your property. Or it just makes it hard, you then, oh my gosh, I have a lien on here, I've got to deal with it. But up until then, you can kind of push it aside. Whereas if you were an independent autonomous city, you can set up the rules inside your charter, inside whatever ordinance you pass, to make that impact more enforceable with fines. Now, will that make a difference? Only time would tell. But right now, it seems like the liens are really slow, very slow to actually do much in terms of enforcing that.
Well, is that an issue with individual homeowners, or is that something that happens on a larger scale with builders and developers?
I guess I would say, from what I've been exposed to, it's both.
Okay.
Incorporation, I know that's come up a few times here. How far along are we? When are the studies gonna be complete? And is there enough information right now to determine, obviously, you're for incorporation, but there's a lot of pushback from some other candidates that are running, as well as elected officials that might be impacted because of incorporation. How far along are we? And again, is there enough information for everybody to make that decision, that to follow your lead, that that's the way to go? Or is it just selfish reasons that they're kind of pushing back on?
I think there are a lot of people, I would say, I divide them into three groups. There are people who say, never, ever incorporate, never become a city, stay as we are. And then there are people who say, well, maybe incorporate, but not right now. And then there are people who say, why haven't we done it already? Those are the people I meet. Like, we haven't incorporated yet? What's taking so long? So a lot of it is miscommunication and also misinformation that's being put out, both. And the misinformation is probably being driven by people who stand to lose something if incorporation happens. That's usually where it is. If you say follow the money, you can usually find out why people are doing something.
That's very cynical of you.
I'm sorry.
But probably very realistic.
The point is that the board has done several things over the last while to make it less problematic for the taxpayer if incorporation and becoming a city happens. Reserve funds have been set aside. About $15.5 million is sitting in reserve funds to help with any kind of capital projects or extra expenses that would come up in the immediate time. That's very smart on the part of the board to do that. They've already reduced the tax rate significantly so that if there is any kind of a bump, it would be a much smaller hurt to the taxpayers, both the commercial as well as the residential. Then they're also, what they've done, and I applaud this as well, they've taken steps already to extend contracts and make contracts that would trigger automatically with law enforcement, so that law enforcement would then have 3-year extension on some of their services that would continue, so there wouldn't be an abrupt drop off in our contract with the sheriff's office. We'd be able to continue for 3 years. So I think those are very smart, and I applaud that, and we would need to do that kind of thing with other departments that would have to undergo significant changes.
So you see that there's enough information right now to make a decision to incorporate, obviously, I guess, with your,
Well, I would say not exactly.
Yeah,
There are
yeah.
still studies that are out there that will outline best practices.
okay,
And when you're doing something this big, you want to have everything in front of you about what's the right way to proceed. And maybe there's an A, B, C way to do it. And then you offer something like that to the voters and get them to give input at what's their desires here. It's not a one-size-fits-all, it's not all or nothing. There are many ways to go forward, but still going forward.
right.
You know, we've had the Conroe ISD bond elections going on, and I think a lot of us have learned a lot through that process. And I did become aware that, you know, when a trustee is elected to the board, the superintendent will give them a legal document to sign that basically says you have to go through me to, you basically give up a right to go and talk to employees, you have to go through the superintendent. So if you get elected and the town manager puts a legal document in front of you and says you must go through me to get any information, would you sign such a document?
Well, I served on the city council in Houston, and I served in the United States Congress, which I forgot to mention to you. It was short, but not forgettable.
Who was
It
president?
Wonderful. Who was president? It was Bush coming out, so it was still George Bush. It was
Thanks.
the last few weeks of his term.
Got it.
Yes, I'm sorry. Well, so we were talking
So
about.
if the
Oh, yes,
town
so-
manager puts a document in front
So
of you and says, hey,
in neither of those experiences did anybody do anything like that. I mean, you take an oath, you know, to the Constitution to defend and protect, you know, from enemies, domestic and foreign, but there's no document that you sign. If you do, that sounds inappropriate and
Totally.
dangerous. And dangerous.
Yes.
So you wouldn't sign something
No.
like that? No.
I'll ask one more question regarding transportation, mobility, and obviously, I guess, incorporation. But we know that currently, the Precinct 2 County Commissioner is hell-bent on putting a major, you know, east-west major thoroughfare through the
You
Woodlands.
mean Commissioner Riley?
Sure, yes. If you want to name him, that would be the person, correct? And I'd say since the court chose him to represent the entire county on the Houston-Galveston Area Council, which is where a significant amount of road money is available, they apparently agree with him that there should be a major east-west thoroughfare. So my question is, as council or as township board member, what do you plan to do, or do you think you should do, what should the council do to stop that madness of making an FM 1960 right through the heart of the Woodlands?
Well, I agree
Like
with
that's
you.
ever a good thing.
Well, I agree with you. It would be a disaster for the Woodlands. Probably beneficial for developers out to the west of us.
Oh, sure.
So again, you know, that's of importance to recognize.
And we know I-45 is just standing there ready to take all that extra traffic, right? We'll never feel a thing.
No.
So my
you
question
wouldn't-
is,
you wouldn't feel
what
it.
can the township do to stop that from happening?
Well, the referendum showed clearly that the township was opposed to it, and the commissioner should hear that loudly.
You would think, I
You would
agree.
think. He did come to visit us at the Woodlands Republican Women and talked a bit about that. He did say, and I, by the way, am the chaplain at the Woodlands Republican Women's Club. I'm proud of that, and I'm honored for that. I also am the sponsor of the Young Republicans. But I don't think he was too keen on talking about it in great detail. But what he did say, because that subject came up, he did say that if that road is ever built, and I'm paraphrasing, but it sounded like it's not on me. If it
Well-
was ever built, it's not on me.
Actions speak louder than words.
No.
As county commissioner, he has bought the property necessary to do an extension like we're talking about. So based on that, I don't see how we can doubt that's what he fully intends to do. And again, the county commissioner's court is fully willing to putting him in a position to get funding for it. So what does the township do? Is it just something that's inevitable, or what
I
can
don't-
it do?
Well, that's
And what
one
can
of
the
the-
corporation do to
That's
stop
one of
that?
the impetuses, or impeti, perhaps, to move on becoming an independent city sooner rather than later. And you asked about the timeline for that. And even though the studies are not completed yet, they should be completed at the earliest or at the latest in early 2020. And if there is a decision to move on that, which I would support, then the 2020 election would be reasonable, because you're going to have a big turnout in that, and you have a good representative base to go out and voice their opinions on that.
So that luncheon that Riley spoke at that
Were you
day.
there?
Yeah, I was there.
Yes, I remember, I think. I
Yeah,
remember.
so how many Pinocchios do you think he run that?
Oh, he probably got several, at least 4 or 5, yeah. But what he did speak about also is the Mansion Way road expansion. And, but that would be deleterious to the Woodlands as well. You could call it, Woodlands Parkway
Junior.
South.
0.38.
No, it
Or
will
south.
become senior.
Or Woodlands
at that
Parkway
point.
South, because it's just a few yards south, right? It's not a full mile, but a quarter mile south. It would be a disaster. So, you have political maneuvering, you have exercise your voice at the Houston-Galveston Area Council, and then legal. We could try, I'm not sure we'd get very far, to delay by
Environmental
suing.
impacts thing.
By suing, it's hard to, because we are not a city. If we were a city, we'd have a lot more leverage.
You're right, environmental
Environmental
impact,
impacts
probably
there.
shut it down, Bill.
Okay, position 5, there are 3 positions open. Why'd you choose position 5?
Well, when I first looked at this, the only seat, and I think you're misstating if I may say, the 2 seats that are open are 5 and 7. 6 is
Okay.
occupied.
But it's
by
up
Dr.
for re-election or election,
Yes,
yes.
yes, they're all running.
Yes.
But right. So when I first looked at this, the only one that was truly open was notified by John, or occupied by John McMullen, and he had said early on in the spring that he was not going to run.
Okay, so a vacancy
and I-
made it attractive.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so then the follow-on question to that is, how do you see what John McMullen has done versus what you plan to do? Compare yourself with John McMullen's accomplishments, viewpoints, goals, whatever.
Well, that's a little bit difficult for me because we are completely different persons, but I'm sure that he's done a wonderful job, and I will just say the board as a whole, and him included, have done a wonderful job, and I don't really have much criticism for them, if any, of what they've done. So I'm glad to have him step down to, and since there are no term limits, I think it's a good thing, to have no salary. That's very important for people to know. There is no salary, so there's no incredible incentive for people to become permanent occupants of that illustrious chair up there, unlike the U.S. Congress, where they seem to become very homey very quickly there. So I'm a big fan of term limits, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I think if there's an opportunity to put that in the charter, should we become a city, I would be very happy to work toward putting term limits in there, if that could be a possibility.
Okay, and if I could shove one follow-on in, okay. How about the opponents? You have 2 other people running for this position. What do you see as the key differences between yourself and those 2 opponents?
Well, to start with, if I can have a few seconds, I did not vote in the Democrat primary, whereas they did in 2018, and I think that needs to be stated at some point. This is a nonpartisan race. I recognize that fully, and it's clear that people know that I'm a Republican. I served in the United States Congress as a Republican, so there's no illusions about where I stand on things, but it's just important, I think, to know that people may call themselves independents, but when they vote in a primary of the Democrat Party, they belong to that party.
Okay, Dennis?
Okay, a little more about the Woodlands Parkway extension. We live about 10 miles from here in a community that has horses and golf carts all over it. And they decided to put in Fish Creek Thoroughfare.
So you're in Wood Forest?
Well, we're in Montgomery Trace right before Wood
Right,
Forest.
of course.
So no more horses, no more golf carts. We talked to Charlie Riley, and he said, well, thousands benefit at the expense of a few hundred homeowners. So it happens all over the state. What would you say to others in Montgomery County who say Woodlands is just being selfish, trying to avoid the same fate that almost everybody else has to suffer?
I mean, having
By
roads?
having roads come through your subdivision.
Like Woodlands Park.
Like Fish Creek. Fish Creek comes right through the middle of our subdivision.
Was that a new street altogether or a widening of an existing?
Well, it ended at a creek. You've probably been down there. It's a great big bridge, a pretty big creek. Everybody, including Charlie, said, well, we'll never put a road over there.
Yeah, there was right of ways there, but to follow on.
Yeah, it was,
And now it's a
1,000
major
foot of loading.
thoroughfare going out to Wood
but we
Forest.
thought we'd never have a road. Luckily, we're at least one block off. But it is the same sort of thing, and I think it happens lots of places.
Well, it does, and development does happen, and that's one of the benefits of being in a growing state. And one of the challenges, too, of being in a growing state is protecting the homeowners, protecting the values of your home, and also accommodating the wishes of a community down the road, you know, that might want to have something to do, take a little bite at your apple. But I think that being as the Woodlands is not yet done, but if it was to be a city, then there would be certain guidelines that could be put in place and would be allowed to us that say we have a say versus a homeowners association, which is what you're, I think, talking about, which doesn't have a whole lot of clout against a county commissioner, but a city does. And so, you know, you've seen other cities put in loops around their city just to prevent some sort of ingress and egress that they didn't want, especially with hazardous traffic, that sort of thing. That's what cities do to try to protect their interests. Everybody's always trying to protect their interests. And I'm running for the township of the Woodlands, so my interest is the residents of the Woodlands and putting them first. I obviously want to be polite to all of our neighbors and work with our neighbors as well.
So these are 2-year terms, and you indicated in favor of term limits. How long do you anticipate serving if you don't?
Well, I look at things in terms of a decade. I would think, I mean, I know there are mayors and different people in the great wide world that serve 30, 40 years, and lots of Congress members who do that. I think that that's overly generous. And I think that most of the good stuff you can get done, or a lot of it, you can get done if you know you've got a time limit to do it. If it's open-ended, the job gets open-ended too, the projects get open-ended. So when I went into the city hall, I was term limited to 3 terms. And that was actually kind of a refreshing feeling, because you knew that you better get it done now.
So 2-year terms?
3 2-year terms in those days. I think they've changed. But 3 2-year terms. And I thought, you know, that's not a bad thing, because it allowed me to get in to the city council, because there was an open seat. Orlando Sanchez was rolling out, and I was able to get in. And I think he's running again for controller. I think I heard that. So anyway, the point is, term limits are a good thing. The exact number can vary depending on the situation and the circumstances, but I think that they're a good thing. And I would like to see something like that put into the framework of the city if we become a city.
Were you there when Michael Berry was there?
We came in together.
Oh, did you? Really? Oh, wow.
We
So
run
what
a
do you
campaign
think it
trail
is?
together.
So what'd you think of his philosophy, ideology,
We were almost always voting the same.
the same way?
Not always, but almost
Yeah.
always.
What would you differ on?
I knew you were gonna ask me that, and I can't really tell you, but, because I can't really tell you for sure, but almost always we were on the same page. We had a good group. We
You're
had
not just saying that
Addie
because
Wiseman.
you're a Tea Party, right?
No,
Okay.
no, we had Addie Wiseman and Michael Berry and Mark Ellis, and Tony Lawrence, and a lot of people who were very strong on property rights, low taxes, free enterprise.
I think we got a romper room next to us.
Yes, I think it's
Dave?
so.
Just to, maybe change topic a little bit, so, you know, I go to these transportation council meetings. I was at one the other day, and one of the couple city officials stood up and talked about, you know, putting an elevated train out to the bush. And then, you know, recently,
Are you talking about Houston Galveston Area Council?
yeah, the Houston Galveston Area Council, you know, in one of the meetings, there were several members of this city advocating when they rebuild 40 or 45, they will leave enough space and put an elevated train out the bush. And then recently, Conroe contracted with Houston Metro to provide some park and ride structure. Do you have any thoughts about encouraging Houston Metro to move out into Montgomery County?
Well, I'm not for that. We have, in the township, we have an express bus system now that provides one of the best return on investments of any transportation that's governmentally managed. Any of them, we have the best in terms of rider satisfaction, and then also less government prop up and support versus actual ticket sales that come in. So we've got a good thing. I don't know why we would want to put another penny on our sales tax or take a penny away from us just to buy into Metro. It's a long way away, and I would think we're doing just fine right now. There is some interest in serving some new areas, new destinations, but that's all driven from the ridership. It's not build it and they will come, which is usually the Metro philosophy.
James?
So they're very religious people. They pray a lot for riders.
But I guess that's a good thing. Hope springs eternal.
So we got enough time to go around the table and
Now, as a doctor, I'm sure you're familiar with the nebulous idea patients have of what anything's going to cost, particularly, you know, if there's anything serious, until way down the road. So I'm going to ask you to help the future taxpayers get a clearer understanding of what you feel as Incorporated, the Woodlands, should be doing with its tax dollars. In particular, the Woodlands is a conservative area, but at the same time, the Woodlands likes amenities. You know, you have to recognize nothing wrong with that. Yet, there's quite a bit of money that's being spent or given to nonprofits, to charities. And the idea of taking tax dollars that no one has a choice to pay or not, and giving that tax dollars to an entity that's really supposed to be funded through voluntary donations, that's not a voluntary donation. So my question is, what charities or what criteria would you use on the money to be given to charities, and which ones would you want to continue? Like right now, interfaith, there's a long list of people that line up for the tax coffer, their charities.
Sure. Right. That's a very good question, and that was addressed to some degree during the budget process this last cycle.
Yeah.
Were you there by any chance?
No,
but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but you could explain it, go ahead.
Okay. As you said, if there is a pot of money that a group, if it happens to be nonprofits, it's nonprofits. If it happens to be engineers, good. You know, if it happens to be any kind of vendor, they're going, and that pot's available to you. People will line up
Sure.
and try to access that. And that's what happens with nonprofits when they realize that there is money available. Well, that's not all bad, because sometimes they can, as a community, we can bring down federal funds and then, like, sometimes on a 10 or a 9-to-1 match, and we can utilize
Sure.
a lot for our residents. That's the payback. The residents get something that they're paying a dime out of a dollar for in tax money that they really need. And I'll talk about Meals on Wheels. You know,
Okay.
some services, there's a federal program for the aging, and that's a good thing, you know, because people count on.
And you're saying that's matched by federal funds?
Some of those matches are big, yes. And so if the match is good enough and the service is good enough, I say, show your case. Present your case, have a standardized form that every nonprofit has a right to fill out, present their case, and then if it's of sufficient benefit, and this is your pot, you establish what your pot is, what your fund is, and then you say, you just rank order and you have a line, you say, I don't fund anything below this line, and then you go to the next year. But it has to be a benefit to the residents, and it has to ideally bring value back. If they bring in, like an event that has to bring in hotel dollars and sales tax dollars, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, you dropped one of the magic words that I already noted here. Back to the Woodlands Parkway or Mansions Way or whichever. The Woodlands is concerned about traffic coming through. You mentioned earlier that some cities freeway around them. I've actually heard that conceptually discussed for the Woodlands. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have not seen that drawn on a map, and I don't know. I think from what I've heard, it's just, this is what other communities have done to avoid what Dennis was talking about, which is through traffic. And we all know that. Whether that has any future for the Woodlands that would have to be something done really with the county.
It's something, could you support something like that?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to see it laid out.
Okay.
Who would pay for it, who would benefit from it, where it would go from, where it would go to. But I'm interested always in knowing what's out there. You know, people come up with some brilliant way to support better traffic flow. I'm always interested in seeing that, but I don't want it to come through, you know, to direct more traffic through the Woodlands. I think that's a very bad idea. And that's not what the people of the Woodlands came to the Woodlands for. The residents came here for, you know, to have a peaceful wooded sanctuary where they would be working close to their homes and not have to fight that freeway traffic if at all possible. So to bring the freeway through is the opposite of why they came. And people would leave. They'd vote with their feet.
I understand. So the people that actually want to come to the Woodlands, say from Magnolia, and actually want to come to the Woodlands to shop for the various amenities so they can partake of the amenities, how would they, if you try to block Mansions Way, is that fair to the folks outside?
Well, that's the balance that we have to recognize. We love everyone to come and enjoy. So that's the balance between having too much of a good thing, too many cars, too much traffic, so nobody can enjoy, or you have to limit and maybe have better ways for them to get in and out. I don't know, maybe using some of those express buses if it got to be that serious that we would need to bring people from somewhere else. But I don't see that as being a critical issue right now.
Okay.
Dennis, what's
Okay.
your question?
Real quick. You know, a lot of people in Texas were born into Democratic homes and migrated Republican later on. Have you in the last decade or so supported or voted for any Democrats? And if you contributed in any way to Black Lives Matter, Gay Pride, Rainbow Coalition, Planned Parenthood, or any groups like that?
None until you said Planned Parenthood. I did not contribute, don't recall ever contributing, but what I did do, and it was kind of almost God saving my soul, really, because from medical school on, and remember I told you I didn't tell you, but my mother, she had 6 children, and we were in a Catholic home, but there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about this whole abortion thing. It was just assumed that you would be opposed to it. When I went to medical school, I swallowed that whole Kool-Aid of it's not a baby until further down the line, it's just cells, and therefore you don't really want to restrict a woman's rights, do you? And it became the law of the land. And so I thought, oh yeah, well I don't really want to get too involved in that. But, so first time I had to publicly really talk about that, publicly, was whenever I ran for city council. And I received a survey. And the survey was, would you support Planned Parenthood somehow on there? And I thought, oh man, what does that have to do with the city? But I answered it honestly, and I said, I guess I would, you know, because since I was in medical school, I thought they were probably okay. I didn't really know exactly how many. I didn't know much about what they did, but I knew that they probably did abortions, but they mostly did good things, quote, good things is what I thought. But, so then, once I did that, it was almost like eye-opening, because I started getting calls from Texas Right to Life, and different, and the Joe Poynan's group, and Life Advocates or something like that. And so I started getting all these people talking to me about, did you know this? Did you know that the heartbeat was there? And here I'm a doctor, right? I thought I knew everything. Did you know that the heartbeat started at 5 weeks? 6 weeks for sure. Did you know that the baby develops fingernails and eyelashes by 12 weeks? Did you know that the baby feels pain by 20 weeks, and probably earlier, but definitely scientifically proven the baby feels pain? And then I started looking at videos and doing research, and the real crack, I was cracking, you know, already by all the talking that people were doing, and they weren't mean, but they were definitely making me think about my issue. And it wasn't even my issue, but all of a sudden it's out there, and so it's becoming, I have to deal with it. And one of the big deciders was one day I was at a polling place, and a young girl comes up to me, and she says, "Are you Dr. Sekula?" And I said, "I am." And I thought, oh good, somebody knows me and they're gonna be nice to me. And then she says, "Are you a dermatologist?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "I'm an Accutane baby."
Wow.
And I said, nothing, because I was so startled. What she said is like saying, I'm from Mars, because I'm a dermatologist, and I had always assumed that if a woman was exposed to Accutane, because I'd seen an Accutane baby at Texas Children's Hospital, and I saw how horribly deformed and so many malformations this little baby had. He was blind and deaf and had a small head and heart problems, and so I have that image in my head, and so I've been taught it's either miscarriage or birth defects. That I thought those were the two options. And so the knee jerk was to tell a woman, if you ever get pregnant when you're taking Accutane, you should consider an abortion. And I probably said that 1,000 times, maybe more, throughout 30 years. You know, that's a lot of talking. And here she was standing in front of me, and I asked her, I said, I probably said nothing, and she said, "You probably are surprised to see me." And I said, "I'm shocked." And she said, "Yes, the doctor advised my mother to have an abortion." I said, "Was it me?" And she said, "No." I just couldn't believe it, you know, because I thought, well, what else preconceived notions have I had all those years that are lies, that are false? And it turns out I did more research after that point on Accutane. We don't know the data. A lot of it was cover your you-know-what, so that you're not exposed to lawsuits, and so that's what a lot of people do. And so I realized after that I had to get that off my literature. I made a big change in my life. I went from being kind of darkly pro-choice, pro-abortion, to being, and quiet, you know, to being openly pro-life, because the more I learned, the more I realized I have a lot of making up to do, a lot of making up to do. So yes, that's a big,
Yeah.
and if I had not gotten into politics,
Mm-hmm.
I would still be in that darkness, you know, still thinking that I probably knew better than my mother, but, you know, not feeling good about it, but still just probably never have changed.
And nothing to Antifa or Occupy.
No, no.
Been waiting to ask that the whole time.
Just clarify.
Might go to wrap it up now, up to 5 minutes if you like, and then we'll
Okay.
shut her down.
Okay, good.
Thank
Well, as we started off, my name is Dr. Shelley Sekula-Gibbs, and I've been happy to be here and share with you and learn from you. I'm running for the Woodlands Township Board Position 5, which is an open seat. And I'm here to ask for the Tea Party's endorsement and for all people who, you know, share my belief that the priorities in life are God, family, and country, and that we work together to solve problems, to make our communities better, and we do that communicating and standing on core principles. So I hope that you'll help me get out and win this election, and look forward to working with you.
All right, thank you very much for coming out, appreciate it.
freeway around them. I've actually heard that conceptually discussed for the Woodlands. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have not seen that drawn on a map, and I don't know. I think from what I've heard, it's just, this is what other communities have done to avoid what Dennis was talking about, which is through traffic, and we all know that. Whether that has any future for the Woodlands that would have to be something done really with the county.
It's something, could you support something like that?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to see it laid out.
Okay.
Who would pay for it, who would benefit from it, where it would go from, where it would go to. But I'm interested always in knowing what's out there. You know, people come up with some brilliant way to support better traffic flow. I'm always interested in seeing that, but I don't want it to come through, you know, to direct more traffic through the Woodlands. I think that's a very bad idea. And that's not what the people of the Woodlands came to the Woodlands for. The residents came here for, you know, to have a peaceful wooded sanctuary where they would be living close to working close to their homes and not have to fight that freeway traffic if at all possible. So to bring the freeway through is the opposite of why they came. And people would leave. They'd vote with their feet.
I understand. So the people that actually want to come to the Woodlands, say from Magnolia, and actually want to come to the Woodlands to shop for the various amenities so they can partake of the amenities, how would they, if you try to block Mansions Way, is that fair to the folks outside?
Well, that's the balance that we have to recognize. We love everyone to come and enjoy. So that's the balance between having too much of a good thing, too many cars, too much traffic, so nobody can enjoy, or you have to limit and maybe have better ways for them to get in and out. I don't know, maybe using some of those express buses if it got to be that serious that we would need to bring people from somewhere else. But I don't see that as being a critical issue right now.
Okay.
Dennis, what's
Okay.
the question?
Real quick. You know, a lot of people in Texas were born into Democratic homes and migrated Republican later on. Have you in the last decade or so supported or voted for any Democrats? And if you contributed in any way to Black Lives Matter, Gay Pride, Rainbow Coalition, Planned Parenthood, or any groups like that?
None until you said Planned Parenthood. I did not contribute, don't recall ever contributing, but what I did do, and it was kind of almost God saving my soul, really, because from medical school on, and remember I told you I didn't tell you, but my mother, she had 6 children, and we were in a Catholic home, but there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about this whole abortion thing. It was just assumed that you would be opposed to it. When I went to medical school, I swallowed that whole Kool-Aid of it's not a baby until further down the line, it's just cells, and therefore you don't really want to restrict a woman's rights, do you? And it became the law of the land. And so I thought, oh yeah, well I don't really want to get too involved in that. But so first time I had to publicly really talk about that publicly was whenever I ran for city council. And I received a survey. And the survey was, would you support Planned Parenthood somehow on there? And I thought, oh man, what does that have to do with the city? But I answered it honestly, and I said, I guess I would, you know, because since I was in medical school, I thought they were probably okay. I didn't really know exactly how many. I didn't know much about what they did, but I knew that they probably did abortions, but they mostly did good things, quote, good things is what I thought. But, so then once I did that, it was almost like eye-opening, because I started getting calls from Texas Right to Life and different, and the Joe Poynan's group and Life Advocates or something like that. And so I started getting all these people talking to me about did you know this? Did you know that the heartbeat was there? And here I'm a doctor, right? I thought I knew everything. Did you know that the heartbeat started at 5 weeks? 6 weeks for sure. Did you know that the baby develops fingernails and eyelashes by 12 weeks? Did you know that the baby feels pain by 20 weeks, and probably earlier, but definitely scientifically proven the baby feels pain? And then I started looking at videos and doing research, and the real crack, I was cracking, you know, already by all the talking that people were doing, and they weren't mean, but they were definitely making me think about my issue. And it wasn't even my issue, but all of a sudden it's out there, and so it's becoming, I have to deal with it. And one of the big deciders was one day I was at a polling place, and a young girl comes up to me, and she says, "Are you Dr. Sekula?" And I said, "I am." And I thought, oh good, somebody knows me and they're gonna be nice to me. And then she says, "Are you a dermatologist?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "I'm an Accutane baby."
Wow.
And I said, nothing, because I was so startled. What she said is like saying, "I'm from Mars," because I'm a dermatologist, and I had always assumed that if a woman was exposed to Accutane, because I'd seen an Accutane baby at Texas Children's Hospital, and I saw how horribly deformed and so many malformations this little baby had. He was blind and deaf and had a small head and heart problems, and so I have that image in my head, and so I've been taught it's either miscarriage or birth defects. That I thought those were the two options. And so the knee jerk was to tell a woman, if you ever get pregnant when you're taking Accutane, you should consider an abortion. And I probably said that 1,000 times, maybe more, throughout 30 years. You know, that's a lot of talking. And here she was standing in front of me, and I asked her, I said, I probably said nothing, and she said, "You probably are surprised to see me." And I said, "I'm shocked." And she said, "Yes, the doctor advised my mother to have an abortion." And I said, "Was it me?" And she said, "No." I just couldn't believe it, you know, because I thought, well, what else preconceived notions have I had all those years that are lies, that are false? And it turns out I did more research after that point on Accutane. We don't know the data. This was, a lot of it was cover your you-know-what, so that you're not exposed to lawsuits, and so that's what a lot of people do. And so I realized after that I had to get that off my literature. I made a big change in my life. I went from being kind of darkly pro-choice, pro-abortion, to being, and quiet, you know, to being openly pro-life, because the more I learned, the more I realized I have a lot of making up to do. A lot of making up to do. So yes, that's a big, and if I had not gotten into politics, I would still be in that darkness, you know, still thinking that I probably knew better than my mother, but, you know, not feeling good about it, but still just probably never have changed.
And nothing to Antifa or Occupy.
No. No.
I've been waiting to ask that the whole time.
Just clear.
Might go to wrap it up now, up to 5 minutes if you like, and then we'll
Okay.
shut her down.
Oh, okay, good. Well, as we started off, my name is Dr. Shelley Sekula-Gibbs, and I've been happy to be here and share with you and learn from you. I'm running for the Woodlands Township Board Position 5, which is an open seat. And I'm here to ask for the Tea Party's endorsement, and for all people who, you know, share my belief that the priorities in life are God, family, and country, and that we work together to solve problems, to make our communities better, and we do that communicating and standing on core principles. So I hope that you'll help me get out and win this election, and look forward to working with you.
All right, thank you very much for coming out, appreciate it.